Welcome back, boxing fans. Obviously, this is not a new topic. We've been talking about it all week, but this is my take on it. Stay tuned and let's talk about Turkey taking over America. Obviously, this was big news this week when it was broken that actually the whole conversation we'd heard about Terrence Crawford fighting in America, in California, was reality. Fighting uh, Madrimov for his WBA world title. Of course, initially, a lot of people were mocking and ridiculing Bud Crawford. A lot of people that were sort of fanboying Errol Spence for stealing the big WB or big 154-pound opportunity away from him. People were, of course, rolling with that, but that's not really the way it's unfolded. So now let's get to the reality of the situation and not just the narrative pushed by some unhappy boxing channels or boxing fans. So here we go. Riyadh season, Crawford Madrimov. This is a great card in America, and it's great that all this money that obviously is being spent in Saudi Arabia is now, of course, moving outside of the Middle East and moving to the UK and now the US. Uh, all along, I was saying if the opportunity is there, US promoters should jump at it, whether that's Al Heyman, the PBC, or Golden Boy De La Hoya, or Top Ranks Bob Arum, or anybody else that's available. It just so happens that UK promoter Eddie Hearn is the one that's kind of headlining this whole event. But in headlining this event, we have to be honest, really it's Turki Alishika who obviously is funding it, is the one picking the fights, and is really one getting together with all these other promoters and getting them in the conversation and actually making these cards. So that's the great news. A lot of these promotional problems back and forth that we've had historically, because he's now stepping up, he's breaking down those walls, and this can only be good for boxing and boxing fans. So let's break it down. Let's look at it in depthly and see what's going on. So this is the card that obviously was confirmed, and obviously based on yesterday's results, Virgil Ortiz beating Delorme by a first round knockout, a great body shot. Now we know this card is confirmed. And this is a great card. I mean, let's break it down from fight to fight. And what's great about this is you have fighters from all kinds of promotional companies, right? You got PBC Al Heyman fighters, you have Golden Boy Oscar De La Hoya fighters, you obviously have DAZN fighters, Matchroom. So it's great that all these promoters are working together. You even obviously have some smaller promoters that are also involved in this card as well. So let's start at the top. Crawford versus Madrimov. A lot of people are kind of ridiculing Crawford, which historically they always find a way to do. Yet these are the same people that say they are pro-black and all about Black American boxing channels or Black American boxers. Yet consistently, they're some of the most critical people against guys like Bud Crawford. Bud Crawford obviously was in position to get a Tim Tszyu fight for the WBO title and potentially the WBC title. But we know how that worked out. Obviously, a cut led to him losing to Funduro. Funduro said that he's not available to fight. And so that fight obviously fell through as well. So there's two opponents that fell through, right? And at this point, what did you want Bud Crawford to do? He's the WBO mandatory. We know this is true because the WBO just mandated that the winner of the fight between Madrimov and Crawford need to be fighting Funduro for his WBC and WBO title specifically. And if he doesn't do that, the WBO title will be stripped of him and it will go to the winner of Crawford and Madrimov, meaning whoever wins that is going to become a unified champion. And all of a sudden, Funduro, who is a unified champion, is going to be dropped down to just a WBC champion. And then you have the IBF champion as well, the guy who's worked with the PBC, but I'm not sure what his affiliations specifically are with the PBC. His last fight against Kalke just happened in Germany under a completely different promoter. So I'm not sure the specifics, but I think he's pretty much a promotional free agent. And anyone that jumps at that probably will get the opportunity to fight him. And what does this mean for Funduro? I mean, fine, he can still fight Errol Spence for the WBC title, but now he's vacating the WBO title, which we did hear initially might have been the whole plan. And, obviously with Tim Tszyu and Virgil Ortiz fighting, you can understand that the winner of this fight is probably going to be in line for a Bud Crawford Madrimov fight somewhere later in 2024 if Funduro isn't available or is unwilling to take on the winner. And that's great news in itself because you already have the schedule unfolding in front of us, right? And that's what I like. I like to see things that are clear and obvious and that we know the promoters have a direction in mind and that things aren't completely random. As far as Crawford versus Madrimov, sure, Crawford is obviously going to be the favorite to win that fight. Madrimov, well, I think he's a very good fighter. Obviously, not the conventional European fighter. Good footwork, obviously a little unorthodox in his style. He brings a different look, right? A different thing to the ring. But he's not a guy that Americans are that familiar with. He hasn't been super active, and he's had a few controversial fights that kind of slowed down his career at times. It's great that he was able to end up getting the WBA opportunity and capitalized on it, and now has a world title, which has put him in this position. If he's able to beat Crawford, I mean, all this talk and all this narrative now goes out the door. Like, just think, it wasn't that long ago where people were all picking Devin Haney to easily beat Ryan Garcia. And we saw how that happened, how that unfolded, right? Just because you assume something is easy and it should play out this way, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. That's why people shouldn't be so quick to criticize. I think the Crawford-Madrimov fight is great. The biggest problem we have with fights is when promoters don't feel that they can afford to finance it because they don't think it'll make money. But since no promoter is funding this, that's not an issue. So we could put this fight together. I saw some people talk about, well, if he can fight Madrimov, why isn't he fighting Boots Ennis? Well, Boots Ennis basically has a title that's already Bud Crawford's title. So by fighting Boots, he's not actually accomplishing anything. I like Boots. I rate Boots. And I think it's great that Boots is now on DAZN, which means inevitably a potential fight between him and Crawford becomes that much more of a reality. That much more of a reality, right? And if it's not Crawford, look forward to maybe a Tim Tszyu Virgil Ortiz, right? That's another possibility for Boots Ennis. All we know is there's big fights on the horizon for him, whether it's that second tier fight between the winner of Tszyu and Ortiz, which would be huge. People have been asking for an Ortiz Boots fight for years, and now it's that much closer and that much more likely to be done. And if it's a Bud Crawford, now the fight makes sense because the promoter can afford to finance it. So that's what stopped the fight from happening originally, right? Is nobody was ducking anybody. It's about where you are in your career and opportunities that are available to you. Bud Crawford right now is looking for big money fights. And thanks to Saudi Arabia, these fights are big money fights. If it was promoted by Americans, PBC or Top Rank, then they wouldn't be. And so the fights probably wouldn't happen. Bud Crawford probably wouldn't be fighting Madrimov. And the Boots Ennis fight probably wouldn't happen. He'd probably be waiting for an opportunity to fight Tim Tszyu for the WBO title, right? But that would mean he'd be inactive, waiting around, and not fighting. Now he's guaranteed fight dates, and that's good news. I'm excited. On the undercard, you have Isaac Cruz versus Jose Valenzuela. Obviously, this is a big PBC matchup. Jose, 135-pound fighter, is moving up to 140 to take on WBA champion, newly crowned champion, Isaac Cruz. It's a great fight. This is a fight that's pretty much at that level. Nobody would say these guys are elite, but they're definitely at a similar level where this fight's very competitive, a great matchup. It was being reported that Valenzuela was going to be fighting De Los Santos in a rematch, but apparently that fight fell through and this fight was made. And I can understand why Valenzuela would jump at this fight because it's probably bigger money and it's a world title fight. So even more reasons for him to go for that. And stylistically, it should be an intriguing fight. It'll be interesting to see if Valenzuela can keep Cruz off of him. That's really what that fight's going to be about, dealing with the pressure from Isaac Cruz. Then, of course, the fight that was just confirmed today, Tim Tszyu versus Virgil Ortiz. This fight is a headline fight. on a pay-per-view by itself, easily, right? We just had Tim Tszyu fight Von Duro, and that fight's not even close to the magnitude of a Virgil Ortiz Tim Tszyu fight. Now you have Virgil Ortiz versus Tim Tszyu, a guy with a 100% KO ratio fighting Tim Tszyu, who people were really rating as probably the best 154 pounder in the division, right? Uh, it's a great fight, a real 50-50 fight. And it's great to see these young guys taking on this level of opposition at this point of their careers. Tim Tszyu is obviously coming off of a loss. Virgil Ortiz is coming off of inactivity and some health concerns. Bounced back with two mid-tier opponents, got rid of both of them, and now is stepping his level up. We'll see how he does. And then heavyweights, American heavyweights representing Andy Ruiz versus Jarrell Big Baby Miller. I mean, in itself, this isn't a fight that really would be a headliner for a pay-per-view. It would headline many cards, but probably not pay-per-view. But you put this as the fourth fight on this card. Oh my God, this shit's dynamite. Sure, Miller's coming off of a loss because he was inactive and had lots of obviously legal issues. Andy Ruiz has been inactive because he's been sort of pricing himself out, waiting to get the big money fight. Many of us were saying, why isn't he part of that whole heavyweight renaissance that's going on in Saudi Arabia? Well, here he is. And this fight's happening in California. How much better could it be than having a guy like Cruz Valenzuela, two Mexicans, Mexican-American, Tim Tszyu, Virgil Ortiz, Mexican-American, Andy Ruiz, Mexican-American against Miller. I mean, you getting a good mix of American-based fighters and Mexican-based fighters that are really going to sell this pay-per-view and really get a lot of attention. And what's even better is then on the undercard, you have Morrell and Cruz, two Cubans. And historically, Cubans have kind of been done wrong in America. They're Latin, but they're not Mexican. So they don't necessarily get the same fan base that Mexicans do. Mexican boxing fans don't really support the Cubans, right? And there's a lot of Cubans in America, but obviously not enough to really be a big fan base for Cuban boxers. So they really are kind of on the outside looking in a lot of times. The fact that they're on this card is great. It gives them a huge platform to showcase themselves. And here we're talking two of the best Cuban fighters in boxing. David Morrell, my favorite 168-pound fighter, the guy I think is the best fighter at 168, right? He's fighting a good, solid opponent in Kalagis. You know, obviously we want to see Morrell in bigger and better fights. And maybe that David Benavidez Morrell fight can happen now that obviously the Middle East is getting behind Morrell and made a big offer already to David Benavidez, saying he could take on the winner of Bivol Beterbiev for undisputed. And then Morrell as an opponent afterwards, if he wins, the shit just gets better and better and better. All those fights are great, right? And for Morrell to get that opportunity at that point, dynamite, fire. And then Cruz, Andy Cruz, gold medal Olympian, beat Keyshawn Davis, now taking on very good opponent Antonio Moran. Obviously, he's only had 3 professional fights. Is this his 3rd or his 4th? So obviously he's being very fast-tracked, as you would if you're a gold medal Olympian who's like 29 years old, 30 years old. So, you know, you don't have all the time in the world to gradually build yourself up. Obviously, his team feels confident enough to put him in with good level of opponents. And he's been in with solid opponents from the first day he's been in the ring, and just getting more professional and getting better day after day. So when I look at this card, I think, man, this card is fire, fire. I think the 2 Cubans win their fights easily. Ruiz, Miller, I think that's a very good fight, but I do favor Ruiz. Tim Tszyu versus Ortiz, a real 50-50 fight, but I got to lean towards Ortiz if he's healthy. Isaac Cruz versus Valenzuela, I got to lean towards Isaac Cruz. Great chin, hard to hit clean, and what a gas tank this little short man has. And then obviously you got to favor Bud Crawford to beat Madrimov, but you can't overlook Madrimov. Madrimov has everything that could make the fight difficult for Bud Crawford. He's the biggest natural fighter that Crawford's been in with. He's fast, has good footwork, has good power, obviously a good amateur pedigree, and is a little unorthodox, meaning that he can throw and land punches that aren't conventional, which can sometimes catch very good fighters off balance, right? So I do favor Crawford, of course, but that's my early prediction. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about these fights. Here's the man. Thank you very much. Whenever somebody helps support a sport that you really love and really sort of galvanize it and helps it grow through the great advertisements they've been doing for fights, which have been fucking groundbreaking, and just spreading the money worldwide to really build up fan bases in the US and in the UK and globally. Obviously, being part of DAZN, which I know some people just don't like DAZN for whatever reason it is, but DAZN is a global app. Like literally, I can turn here and DAZN is on my phone. I can also show, what is it? Amazon. Amazon's here somewhere, I think. But the problem with Amazon, I can't necessarily watch boxing. And you notice there's no ESPN and there's no Showtime because outside of America, those apps don't work, right? So I'm happy that he's attached himself to DAZN because with his finance behind it, as well as DAZN's own financing, the world is our oyster. And I'm super happy that PBC fight Canelo Munguia is going to be on DAZN next weekend, which means I can watch it on my big screen TV and do a live with you. So jump in next week and we'll watch that fight and chop it up. But let's move forward. Some other interesting news. Another fighter gone from the PBC is apparently going to be Gary Antoine Russell, another fighter with 100% KO ratio. It looks like he's probably moving to Matchroom with Eddie Hearn at the 140-pound division. I mean, that's not bad news when you think about all the current top fighters at 140 pounds that are affiliated with Matchroom, whether you're talking Haney, Garcia, Matias, now, of course, Russell. It's good news because it just means making these big fights is just going to be that much easier. And also for Russell, a very entertaining fighter, great power, right? Not as technically good as his older brother, but more dynamic in his style, right? Much more of a hunt you down, knock you out type of guy, like Virgil Ortiz. And so it's great TV. You imagine doing a Gary Russell fight with Subriel Matias, which is a real possibility now that he's there. And imagine that fight. Imagine that fight. Two guys with basically 100% KO ratios going in there to fight for that IBF world title. Please sign me up. Where do I pay? Right? It's good news. I'm happy. And I ain't saying this because I'm hating on the PBC or Al Heyman. When Al had all the fighters at 147 and 154, then I praised Tim Tszyu for going to obviously sign with Al Heyman to make the fights he needed to put himself in position to get the big fight with Charlo. He never got the fight, but he did do what he had to do. Devin Haney, I praised for doing the same thing by signing with Top Rank so he could get that Kambosos fight for undisputed. The same way I praised Canelo Alvarez for going over to the PBC to get that Caleb Plant fight to become undisputed at 168. I mean, I'm not letting promotional bias get in the way of fights. I appreciate fighters doing what they have to do to make fights by joining the promoter who's in position to make the fights. And that's it. There's no hate, as some people would love to make it out to be. So here we go. These are just the early rankings. Obviously, you got Funduro, who's there. Bolchuk, who should be his mandatory for the WBC title. Madrimov, obviously Ortiz is right there. Somehow, I don't know how Ortiz is number one, but That just means that obviously Ortiz is going to be a mandatory opponent for the winner of Madrimov Crawford, which is a great fight. We were talking about Ortiz, just like we're talking about Boots fighting Crawford at 147 when they were WBO mandatories. Both of them walked away to go in a different direction. Now is the time, right? Especially with the money behind them to make the fights. Obviously, Murtazaliev, who just became the IBF champion, beating Jack Calquet. Maybe Erickson Lubin will get a PBC opportunity to fight for a world title against him. And then the PBC could have 2 belts and 2 world champions at 154 pounds. And then, of course, Funduro could fight the winner of Crawford Madrimov to become a 3-belt unified champion, leaving only potential fight with Erickson Lubin at the IBF to become undisputed if things worked out that way. And then once again, the PBC would have complete control of the 154-pound division. Or if he doesn't take that fight, that belt will go to the winner of Madrimov Crawford. And then obviously an Ortiz fight or a Tim Tszyu fight, both number 1 ranked, one by the WBA, one by the WBO. Whoever wins will then inevitably become the mandatory for the winner of Madrimov Crawford. So it's a good thing, man. Things are looking up. And I don't know how Vito Melanicki fucking Jr. is ranked number 4 by the WBA. It just shows you how terrible the WBA's rankings are. Because Melanicki already has a loss, has never fought a fucking top 25 fighter in his career. Never. Let's just check it out. Because these fucking paying sanctioning bodies to put people in rankings is just fucking terrible. It's really the problem in boxing. Easily. That shit's disgusting, man. I can look at BoxRec. I guarantee Vito Melanicki Jr. is probably not even ranked in the top 50. I'm just speculating, but here, let's look. Charlo, Ortiz, Funduro, Tszyu, Madrimov, Brandon Adams, Murtazayev, Lubin, Bolchuk, Teo Cohen. I don't know how that Thai fighter is there. Already took a loss. Conwell, Butayev, Kelly, Baroa, Ramos, Kubrinov, Sora, Slavospermer, Guasha, Mendoza, Silva, Ocampo, Zayas, Metcalf, an Indian fighter. Wow. Trout. Is Trout still around? Colombo, Knapp, Batasai Cook, Egerton, Perez, Calquet, Hogan, Koopman, Teles, who just won a big fight this weekend. He should be far more higher. Cuban fighter. Gilly, Abreu, Nikita Tszyu. How's he ranked at 40? Has he fought anyone? And Victor Melanicki. Sorry, he's 45. That would be a good fight. Melanicki versus fucking Nikita Tszyu. Nikita Tszyu is 9-0 with 7 KOs, right? The best guy he's fought so far was a guy that was 10-0. He's fought a lot of undefeated fighters, but guys that didn't have double-digit wins. 5-0, 7-0, 4-0, 5-0, 2-0-1, 10-0. His last opponent was a guy that was 8-1-1. He fought one guy with a lot of fights, 17-4-2. Right? How does that put you high in rankings? And then, of course, Melanicki Jr. Fucking Christ, man. This dude is 17-1, 21 years old, but hasn't fought anyone. Who did he get beat by? He got beat by James Martin, who was 6-2 back in 2021. Has then went on to beat 6-3-2, 16-3, not bad. 9-4-1, 18-8-2, 19-5, 9-1-1, 23-1, not bad. Probably the best record he's fought. 25-5. His last fight, 22-12-3. And now the guy he's fighting in, Ronald Cruz, who people are familiar with, is 9-3-1. I would not be surprised if Ronald Cruz knocks his ass out. But, let's move forward. So there we go. There's the man, the myth, the legend. Obviously, people have been critical of Madrimov because they don't know who he is and they're questioning about how you fight a guy who has only had such short amount of fights. Yet you look at the 2 guys I just told you about, one of whom is ranked number 4 by the WBA. And then you compare his resume to this guy's resume. When he was fighting Vladimir Hernandez, who was 10-2 in his first fight, Rojas 24-2, Gonzalez 24-12, Barrera 27-5, Navarro 29-9, Walker 20-2, Calambo 14-0, Michelle Soro, who's been a top 10 154-pound fighter for fucking 10 years now, 35-2-1. Then fought him again, 35-3-1. I can't read that guy's name. 16-3. His last fight, Korbinov, 25-0. Like, he's been fighting legitimate fighters. Soro, Korbinov, Eric Walker. These dudes are legitimate, right? And then you think about guys like Barrero and Gonzalez and Rojas. These are the guys you fight when you are a midterm contender. You know, he's fought those guys early, and then he's fought the really high level guys, top 10 guys like Soro and obviously Korbinov, and now is fighting a legend. And maybe it's fighting too much too soon. But, you know, at 29 years old, aren't you going to jump at the chance when it's there for you? I mean, Canelo, whether you want to criticize him for losing to Floyd, when he was 24 years old, he jumped at the opportunity to fight a legend. He lost, but he learned from that. And Madrimov is going to be no different. It's funny that even this happens, but then you have guys like Marco Villegas, you know, a real face in American boxing media. And this is where a lot of this negativity from American media and American YouTubers and American boxing fans come from. Because you're going to hear this kind of shit. All it took to fix boxing was a fuck ton of money. Me and a few media members yesterday were thinking, what happens after? What happens to purses and the fighters in Saudi changes course? Listen to him. You know, you're hating on the fact that right now money is flowing into the game, but this always happened. Vegas had shit tons of money. So then boxing really generated towards Vegas. At one time it was New York, right? Boxing follows the money. Right now it's Saudi Arabia. And oh no, how are boxers going to deal with it when the money's no longer there? What do you mean? When the PBC first fucking started up, they were overpaying their fighters for cherry pick fights. Eventually, they had to start making purses that were the same as every other promoter. They had to tone down. But initially, you want to get fighters, you want to put fights on, you want to gain attention. So you're overspending. DAZN did the exact same thing when they initially opened up. And any upstart promotional company inevitably will do something similar. So all you do is enjoy it while it's here and hope that because of this attention and the magnitude of fights that are being made, that this helps build the sport up in America so that now investment from outside sources around America start flooding into boxing like they do every other fucking sport in the country. And then when the Saudi money dries up, it won't be an issue because you'll have plenty of other people jumping at an opportunity to get on board, right? But leave it to negativity, right? Always people that are so negative. And as I said, I'm super excited to have the two Cuban boys on this card. It's great that guys like Morrell and Andy Cruz are going to get a big opportunity, right? You know, obviously, something some people try to push all the time is they think fighters should all get, I don't know, a certain amount of attention, a certain amount of praise, a certain amount of opportunity just because they are whoever they may be. But unfortunately, sports is not like that. We find that now with women's sports, right? Which wanted to be paid more. Yet constantly we are trying to explain to people, you get what you generate. If you don't generate money, you don't get paid money. You can't expect to get paid like LeBron James when you don't bring in the money LeBron James brings in, right? Whether you're a female basketball player, a female soccer player. That's just the way it is. You're only going to generate more money when you actually can fill out stadiums and generate more money. You look at Messi now, who's playing in the US, and they're selling out 70,000 stadiums to watch Messi play football in a country that doesn't really care that much about football. But because Messi is there, the name recognition, jersey sales, advertisements, it's generating a big buzz. That's what you need if you want to make money. And unfortunately, some boxers don't have the style that really generates a buzz. They could be recognized as the best, but they're never going to get paid or get the attention some other people get. Example, no one thinks Ryan Garcia is the best. Nobody, most people aren't putting him on pay-per-view or sorry, pound for pound lists. But we understand that he's marketable. And you could say that's because he's, you know, not black. Yes. If you want to make it a race thing, you could make it a race thing. It's not because he's not black. It's because he is Latino, right? And the Latino fan base in America boxing is huge. And now they have a good looking, exciting guy to support, just like they did when they had Oscar De La Hoya. And support for Oscar De La Hoya was fucking crazy because not just men went to watch the fights, women did too. So now you're generating more money because it's not just men that are interested in going to watch the sport anymore. Now it's women that are interested. So you have more tickets, more people pushing for pay-per-view. He's generating more money. He becomes the face of American boxing, right? It's not about race. It's about what you generate. I like Morrell. I like Andy Cruz. But unfortunately, sometimes you can be too good. You can have a style that's just not exciting enough or opponents that just don't push you enough. And you're never going to get the attention of some fighters that aren't as good as you, who are in more entertaining fights. And because they're in more entertaining fights, people want to put their fights on TV because they know it's going to grab attention and it's going to generate more money. So they get paid more money than fighters who, in truth, are better than them. But it has nothing to do with being better. It doesn't come down to race. It comes down to green. What can you generate? When What's Her Face was an MMA fighter, what's her name? I can't remember her name. And she was beating all these girls and doing pay-per-views, and she was making more money than every man in the MMA. People weren't moaning and groaning that it was unfair for a woman to make more money than men. They understood she was making money, yes, because she's a woman, but you can't say that's the reason she's a white woman. You can't say that's the reason either. There's been plenty of white women boxers and white women MMA fighters who didn't generate money, didn't create a buzz. So it's more than that. Ronda Rousey had something they didn't have, and that's what made her successful. You look at Katie Taylor right now, who's killing it in college basketball and now going to the WNBA and really looking to generate a lot of buzz in the W. And that's great news for the W. Now these women are going to generate more money, meaning they can get paid more money. And sure, she's going to make more money than all of them because she's the driving force behind it. We can be petty and try to use racial narratives and just hate on somebody being successful, or we can just be rational and understand why things are happening the way they are. So I think it's great these guys are a part of this card. Hopefully it helps highlight how great they are, and hopefully they're in very entertaining fights so that they get buzz moving forward. But, you can never make everybody happy, unfortunately. People are always going to be haters. People are always going to find ways to sneak this and hate on something, even though what's going on is great. It's great for boxing, and it's great for boxing fans, right? The boxers, of course, are generating big money. What's that fucking horn sticking out of my head? The devil in me is coming out. There you go. No, I just need another one there. Okay. I am the devil. But let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about this whole card, this Saudi Arabian money flooding into the US market? Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Do you care, or are you just happy about the fights being made? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Remember to leave your comments below, like, subscribe, and share. And I will see you next time. Same channel, same bad time. Peace out.